All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Book Club. We are on chapters 11 through 15 of Atomic Habits by James Clear. Just to kind of give you guys a little recap of the book so far. We've talked about that habits are the compound interest of self-improvement, that you can compound in a positive direction, but also in a negative direction. So we first couple of the rules of building habits. The first law is to make it obvious. The second law was to make it attractive, and now we are talking about the third law, which is to make it easy. Who doesn't like that, right? So to make it easy, sorry, got to get to the right page here. The third law, make it easy. We're so focused on figuring out the best approach that we never get around to taking any action. It's actually like our human instinct is to avoid failure, and because we want to avoid failure so badly, it's just a human instinct. We don't think about it. We just try to avoid it. We typically will sit around and plot out how to do something, but never actually take the action towards doing it. Because if we actually were to take the action towards doing it, we might actually fail at it, and then who knows? But the real reality is failing at something is learning something. We learn when we fail. We learn a lot more when we fail than when we actually succeed at something. So to try to get that roadblock out of our minds is definitely an important step. But there's a quote from Voltaire: "The best is the enemy of the good." So hearing that quote, "The best is the enemy of the good," it's basically what I was talking about: motion versus action. The difference between being in motion and taking action. The two ideas sound similar, but they're not the same. So when you're in motion, you're planning and strategizing and learning. Those are all good things, but they don't produce any results. So for instance, let's say you want to, I always use this example because I think it's something I'm working on, but say you want to get back into really good shape and you're stuck on the couch. And you can sit on the couch and say, I could go to the gym and I could lift weights and I could, I'll do squats and I'll do bench press and I'll run a mile after that. That's plotting, that's emotion, it's a good idea. But without actually getting to the gym and getting under the bar and doing those squats and doing all that, you're not taking any action. So you're not going to have any results. Action, on the other hand, is the type of behavior that will deliver an outcome. So knowing that, I think both things are important. You need to have motion to lead to action, but if you don't take any action from those motions, you're not going to get any results. Most of us are experts in avoiding criticism, which is going back to that fear of failure that I was talking about. It doesn't feel good to fail or to be judged. We can all agree on that, right? So, especially publicly, especially if it's something where people are going to notice your failure or judge you based on your results. So we tend to avoid those types of situations where they might happen, and that's the biggest reason why you slip into motion rather than taking action. You want to delay that failure. So how can we start to build little habits that lead to basically creating habits that are action, not motion, right? So to do that, we have to do repetition. We have to create a repetition. Things that are habits for you right now are things that you've done thousands of times. So knowing that you have to do something hundreds or thousands of times to create a new habit, I'm sure a lot of people have heard the saying, like, you have to do something for 3 weeks to create a new habit, right? The time actually has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with the repetitions. So you could say, I'm going to create a habit of brushing my teeth twice a day for the next 3 weeks so that I make sure I never miss a morning or a night. And then you ultimately if you don't do that every single day, you're not getting the repetitions in and you're not actually filming the habit. You just took a motion, not an actual action to do it. You have to do those actions over and over and over, hundreds or thousands of times to create an actual habit, a long sustaining habit. So if you want to master a habit, the key is to start with repetition, not perfection. You don't need to map out every feature of a new habit. You just need to practice it. This is the first takeaway of the third law. You just need to get your reps in. Each time you repeat an action, You are activating a particular neural circuit associated with that habit. This means that simply putting in your reps is one of the most critical steps you can take to encoding a new habit. The law of least effort. Actually, I want to go back. I want to read that sentence one more time. Each time you repeat an action, you are activating a particular neural circuit associated with that habit. This means that simply putting in your reps is one of the most critical steps you can take to encoding a new habit. So, I mean, it's pretty straightforward stuff. And it's actually, this is the chapter of making it easy, right? So it is pretty easy. If you want to create a habit, you just have to do it over and over and over and over again. Sure, now most of it has been long enough that making phone calls feels easy. You're not afraid to pick up the phone and call somebody. It's become quite, it's a habit at this point. For me, 9 months in, it's a habit. I pick up the phone, I start dialing, I do it for a few hours, then I have appointments and I go to my appointments. But like, this is when I remember when I first started, I didn't want to talk on the phone. Like, I'm actually like the type of person that doesn't really like to, I would avoid phone calls at all costs. If I had to return something, I would do it through the website portal instead of having to call somebody. Like, I just try to avoid those types of conversations. That was something that I had to overcome and create a new habit of like just being comfortable on the phone and calling people all the time. And like now, it's easy, right? Like, I don't know if anybody else came in here thinking they didn't feel comfortable making 100 phone calls, but now I don't. You agree? Yeah.
I was scared to death.
Yeah, and now it's a habit, right? You don't even think about it. You just come to work and you do your calls. Yeah. So the law of least effort. The less friction you face, the easier it is for your stronger self to emerge. The idea is to make it as easy as possible in the moment to do things that pay off in the long run. So we know that making all these, like coming into work every day and making all these phone calls and doing all this work is going to lead to results, right? We got Bradley sitting here, the king of results. But this guy literally comes in and works. He's the first one here, and he's probably the last one to go home at night. I know for a fact the other day he was showing homes at like 8 o'clock at night or later. And like, so he's really like putting in the work, creating these small habits that are going to carry out into a long, successful career in real estate. And he's already built these good habits. I mean, he must have had them coming from wherever it came from, because you just know what you're doing. I think the idea is to make it as easy as possible in the moment to do things that pay off in the long run. So how do we achieve more with less effort? Trying to pump up your motivation to stick with a hard habit is like trying to force water through a bent hose. Think about that. Trying to pump up your motivation to stick with a hard habit is like trying to force water through a bent hose. You can do it, but it requires a lot of effort and increases the tension in your life. So making your habit simple and easy is like removing the bend in the hose. Rather than trying to overcome the friction in your life, you reduce it. So let's talk about a little bit. I just want to get people kind of engaging a little more. I'm doing a lot of talking, recapping the chapter, but let's hear some ideas, because now we're several weeks into this book. We've talked a lot about habits. What are some small habits that people have tried to start working on, and how are they trying to make those easy for themselves?
Doing my studying for my post-licensing, I try to make sure that when I come home, I set aside a certain amount of time to get that done, instead of just, doing it whenever, making it a habit, because I am a creature of habit, and all this chaos going on, it's been kind of rough on me, but I've learned to adjust and overcome my fears and learn a different way to do things. So
when you get home and you want to make sure you do that studying, have you like created a space in your home, or put
I have an office,
resources
yes,
in one place that you know you're going to go to,
that I can not have any distractions in my office. Close the door. Yes, and that's what I do upstairs.
Nice.
Anybody
else want to share a new habit they've been working on? I've got one. Colin's got one. Here we go.
So with like my to-dos and like sorting all my stuff out, like my system for the day, when I get home, with like before I would just like kind of go home, put my stuff down to go relax and kind of forget to do it and put it off and be like, oh, I'll do it in a bit. I'll do it in a bit. And sometimes it would put off and it would follow up the next day. So I really wanted to get done with that. So I just started telling myself, like, I'm not done working when I get home. So I get home, I won't take the suit off or whatever I happen to be wearing. I'll go sit down at my desk, sort my system out, lay all my stuff out for the next day. And then I can relax. I just had to like get in that habit of telling myself, like, I'm not done. I'm still, just because I'm office or I don't have any more appointments or more phone calls to make, I still have like stuff to do. And that's made it a lot easier to like sit down, tighten up my system, follow up with the last things I need to do for the day.
Alrighty. So the next bit is a really useful tool. It's about simplifying, making the building of these habits, the ideas of these habits smaller in your head, so they're not these like monumental things that you're dreading doing. It's called the 2-minute rule. It's about creating 2-minute long habits. That's all it has to be. So let's say, I've talked about it before earlier in the book, but I use the example of like, if you want to get to the gym, just spend the first 2 minutes of the day waking up, putting on your tennis shoes, walking out the door and locking the door. Now that you're standing there in your tennis shoes, like you're probably going to go to the gym or go for something, but that was just 2 minutes to create a habit. You're not going to create a habit of going running. You're going to create a habit of putting on those tennis shoes or probably exercise. So to use an example of something that I'm working on now, I have an office at home. You talked about your office. It has turned into a dumping ground for everything that we don't want to look at. I'm sure everybody might have a closet like that or something at home. We don't have a garage, so this 4th bedroom of ours has become a bit of a chaos zone. I'd love to have my office back, so it's a huge task to get this thing fixed, and I just have decided I'm going to go in there for 1 minute a day. You know what happens? Spend 1 minute in there. I end up spending more than that. So I think that was for weeks and weeks, I was just like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to go in there. It's like mountains of stuff. So like, I just finally literally reading this book, and they talked about like, just make it simple. I was like, all right, I'll just go in there 1 minute a day and I'll work for 1 minute. Even if that means I'm just organizing one bin or putting one thing away. I don't stop there, but even if that is all I do, it's progress, right? It's getting towards the result that I want. Maybe if I go 1 minute a day, it's going to take 4 years for me to make that room look good, but you'll know that that's not long. A good thing for me, gets me in there. So just kind of recap. So yes, a habit can be completed in just a few seconds, but it can also shape the actions you take for minutes, hours afterwards. Many habits occur at decisive moments, choices that are like a fork in the road and either send you in the direction of a productive day or an unproductive one. Start by mastering the first 2 minutes of the smallest focus on just the first minutes and mastering that stage before moving on to the next. Eventually, you'll hope to build while still keeping on the first 2 minutes of the behavior. This is hilarious. So I'm vegan. I don't know how many of you know that. Hilarious to me. But so there's notes. This is somebody else's notes that I thought were extremely comprehensive on this book. So I've been using them as kind of my resource for the class. They used an example of becoming vegan. So phase 1, start eating vegetables each meal. Phase 2, stop eating animals with 4 legs. Phase 3, stop eating animals with 2 legs. Phase 4, stop eating animals with no legs. Phase 5, stop eating all animal products. Saw how I did it, but it's certainly, for somebody that sees it as like a huge monumental thing, they broke it down into very achievable things. And you could stick with those phases until you feel comfortable to go to the next one. So while we're talking about the 2-minute rule, I want to hear a few examples of how maybe you guys could utilize the 2-minute rule in your own lives. And if you already are, that would be awesome to hear. If you don't volunteer, I'm just going to throw this ball at somebody. There we go. Okay.
So I actually prefer, books rather than Audible. So, every morning, at the kitchen table, I leave the book there and then go in there and get my water breakfast. I read like 2 pages. and then it ended up being like 7, 8 pages. Oh, I gotta go. So
Yeah.
like I said, put the book there. I know I'm gonna get my water, breakfast, read 2 pages. 2 pages turn into like 4, 5, 6 pages. So
For everybody in book club that's not reading the book, take notes. This guy knows how to do it. Break it down in 2 minutes. Who else has one?
Mine would probably be, so I usually walk my dog around the neighborhood, but outside of my neighborhood, there's like a park. So mine would be literally, it's probably like 3 minutes extra of a walk, would just be walking there just to get myself to walk around a little bit more in the morning rather than just making a couple laps.
Yeah. All right, let's get a couple more. Edley, you want to do one?
It's something that you're bad at that you're trying to do for
Yeah, you have it. You could create just by simplifying the first 2 minutes of it.
I think it applies to skincare. Like, no shade, but a lot of people, like a lot of men, don't like take care of their skin. But if you just
You're right.
start to do that whenever you brush, most of us brush our teeth. So like, I find like that, like your morning and evening routine, instead of like making that like separate, like just like doing that as part of, like adding in a little, like, oh, I'm gonna put on moisturizer or sunscreen. For me, everyone in my family has skin cancer,
which is
like
habit
constantly.
stacking from earlier in the book, where it's like, if like after I do this, I will do this. So
Yeah.
after I brush my teeth, I'll wash my face. But if washing your face is like a big deal and you don't like doing it, breaking it down into just a 2-minute thing,
Right.
doesn't have to be a 10-minute scrub every.
Which is what I kind of thought about skincare, but when my sister got skin cancer, my mom got skin cancer, my dad's had skin cancer, and it's like, when is it going to be your turn? It's like, okay, I have to start wearing sunscreen, or I too will have pieces of my face cut out. So I don't know. That was like, by putting it in your morning and evening routine, then man, I don't want sunscreen to go to bed, but like that it sort of absorbs it instead of being like, stop what you're doing, go put on sunscreen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Didn't do anything wrong. All right. So that actually covers the majority of what I wanted to go over this week. One of the chapters is part of the 4th law, and I kind of wanted to, instead of just jumping into the 4th law, just make sure that we fully recap the 3rd law, and then we can talk about the 5th chapter we were supposed to read for this week starting next week, if that makes sense to you guys. But definitely, I mean, so we've learned about habit stacking, we've learned about the 2-minute rule, we've learned about how to, what the 4 steps are to creating these good habits. We'll get into the 4th one next week in more detail. But does everybody feel like they are gaining from reading this book, taking something away from it and actually applying it in their day-to-day life? Awesome. That's really good to hear. I think I have a bad habit of making things into big deals in my head and then avoiding them at all costs. And this book has made me realize that about myself. Actually, the first time I read it is when it made me realize that about, but rereading it and kind of reigniting that fire in me to create these small habits. And it's been fun kind of getting to teach this book to you guys. So definitely appreciate every one of you coming out, reading the book. If you haven't started it yet, please start it. This book is amazing. It's so fun to get to work on yourself in such a simple way. Like, none of these things are hard. So yeah, thanks for coming, guys. I know this one was a little short, but we'll get into the 4th law, make it satisfying, next week, and we'll wrap up the book. All right, guys.